What if I told you a text message to your boss saying "see you later" could make you the suspect in a murder, the murder of your roommate?
Okay, so the case we're going to examine today is about Amanda Knox, who is an American woman who spent almost 4 years in an Italian prison following her conviction for the 2007 murder of Meredith Kircher, a fellow exchange student who shared her apartment. In 2015, Knox was definitively acquitted by the Italian Supreme Court, and I believe she now lives in Seattle. Take it away.
Before we get into anything, we're talking about a crime that happened in a different country. It happened in Italy, so there are different rules, there's different laws, all kinds of stuff like that. So once you hear Mr. Smith and I kind of talk about this, you're gonna be like, well, of course that shouldn't have happened. Well, you gotta understand things might happen because you're talking about a foreigner, an American who was a foreigner in a different country, and that being Italy. So here in Perugia, Italy, is where the story takes place. The first thing I think we should talk about is Meredith Kircher's bedroom, and there was blood everywhere, and there was DNA everywhere. There was a lot more DNA of some people and a lot less DNA of other people, and I think that's where we probably should begin. So what do you think, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen here and bring up Meredith's bedroom. So this is Meredith's bedroom, and as you can see, there's blood on the floor, there's blood on the bookcase. Some other pictures have blood on the wall. Obviously, something bad happened here, and that is Meredith's blood. Originally, she was covered up with a comforter, bed sheet type of a thing. There's some surrounding theories about why someone would cover up a body. We get into that sometimes in different cases, but basically you've got this gruesome murder that has happened in her bedroom. And so you're talking about some people would call it a flat or Italian apartment. Basically, it's a little, like a townhouse, and it had multiple bedrooms. Each roommate of Amanda's had their own bedroom. So Amanda had her own bedroom. Meredith had her own bedroom. I believe there was another student living there. And so what you have is a situation where you have students from other countries. I believe Meredith was from England.
Yes.
And so they are living in this sort of a dorm slash townhouse and going to class and experiencing Italy. And they were having, by all accounts, the time of their lives for a couple weeks, until Amanda comes home one morning and finds some things that don't look right. Maybe I'll let you discuss what she found.
Okay, so she came home from her boyfriend's house in the morning, and first came in, went right in to take a shower. And when she was in the shower, she did notice a little bit of blood in the sink. Didn't think of a big deal. Maybe somebody cut themselves shaving or were washing off a cut, whatever. Didn't think it was a big deal. And then she also saw something in the toilet bowl, and she thought that was weird that somebody didn't flush it. But then she also didn't flush it, which also was kind of weird. But then she carried on with her shower, and when she got out, um, that is when she thought it was weird that Meredith's or roommate Meredith, that her door was locked, and she tried knocking on it, did not get an answer. She ends up calling Raphael, who comes over. That's her boyfriend. He knocks on it, gets no answer. Again, it was locked on the inside though, so somebody had to be in the room to lock it from the inside. So that's when they call police, and that brings up a very, I think, interesting point that if Amanda and Raphael killed Meredith Kutcher, why would they then call the police and have the police come to investigate, and not clean up better than they did, which is leaving the blood and stuff all over the apartment?
So, the premise of this, I guess, Amanda's story, whether you believe it or not, she comes home from her boyfriend's apartment, boyfriend of approximately about 5 days, by the way.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
she's
Even
she's
less.
she's staying overnight at his apartment, and she stumbles in in the morning and goes to take a shower, goes to use the bathroom. There's apparently some evidence of blood, but I guess what really freaked her out was when she looked into the toilet and she saw what looked like rather large feces, I guess, in the
Yeah.
in the toilet. So she freaks out, goes to check with Meredith, and the door's locked. She freaks out even more, can't get in, nobody's answering, calls her boyfriend, and then they start in. So let me just show you the bathroom situation where this all sort of, she sort of, at least her story anyways, is that she started to realize that something wasn't right. So I'm going to share my screen here again, and I'm going to show you the actual bathroom. If you can see it, I know the picture is probably a little bit small. So this is the actual bathroom. Now, when you first look at this, you think, how can someone go into this bathroom and not see all of this blood splatter? I mean, it's ridiculous. What you have to understand is this is after it's been sprayed for the evidence of blood. So a lot of this pinkish, light red color is not actually blood. It's the material that they have sprayed to sort of find blood, which would then turn a different color. So this looks like, how can you miss this? But it wasn't that much blood, which kind of brings me to this picture up here. This is obviously a representation of what Meredith might have seen if she went into that bathroom, which is obviously like this. How can you miss this? Nobody misses this. And so that immediately, that's what kind of clued the police in to start looking at Amanda. Because how are you going to go in and not notice this blood, take a shower, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden look in the toilet, and that's when you notice something is not fine. So what we have to understand is the actual bathroom didn't have that much blood in it. There was some, I think, little specks here and there. It looked like whoever did this to Meredith went into the bathroom to clean up, might have dropped some blood here or there. And I think Amanda does actually confess to noticing some of the blood, but it didn't alarm her. It wasn't enough blood to alarm her.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the next step was we got to talk about, why was Amanda a suspect? And number one really is that she was an American, and this was in Italy. Perugia, Italy is a very small city. I mean, I guess you could probably say it's probably, to give you some kind of context, like the size of Schenectady or Albany or something like that, where it's a city, but it's not a huge city like New York City or Milan or something like that. That would be in Italy, or Rome or something like that. It was a small city. So they wouldn't think, because it was such a small community, that another Italian person would do a grisly murder like this that was so brutal. So the next best thing would be, well, the pretty American girl. She's probably the one that did it. So they started looking at her. And if you look at the backgrounds that Mr. Smith and I have, we have some pictures of Amanda, and she was kind of quirky. she did some weird things. When they were interviewing her, in between, she would go outside and she'd be making out with Raphael, and she would be doing weird things like that. They found pictures on her social media, which is the one I have, where she liked to pose in these weird things, and here she is in a museum, and she's making it look like she's having a great time with a Tommy gun there or whatever. So she's a bit of a weird and quirky person, and it kind of worked against her because they thought her behavior was suspicious, and that meant she was a murderer, which was definitely not the case. We will when they were interviewing her, interrogating her. Again, it's different because we're talking about Italy here. They were smacking her around. They were being aggressive. They kept her in the interrogation room all night long, so she was tired and hungry. And that's where she started saying things. And one of the things in the very beginning you heard me say was about the text message. So she did work part-time at a bar for a guy named Patrick Lumumba. And one night he texted and said, "Hey, listen, it's slow here. You don't have to come in." So she's like, "Oh, great. I don't have to come in. I'll see you later." And now here in America, we say things like "see you later," mean like, I'll eventually see you again. But in Italy, when the Italian police saw that text message, like, "Oh, I'll see you later," does that mean that you guys were planning to kill your roommate together? And that's where it sort of unfolds. Amanda lies and says, "Yeah, I saw Patrick Lumumba and he actually killed Meredith," and blah, blah, blah. And they started investigating Patrick Lumumba, and then they realized that Amanda lied, and then they started investigating her more and more. And she clearly became suspect number one at that point.
Yeah, so it's kind of a, and we don't have the time to go into every crazy aspect of this. And in class, we show the Netflix Amanda Knox documentary, which kind of goes into all these details that we're sort of briefly going over here. But at some point, the media gets involved. The media just sort of stokes this, like they do. There's since the Italian media, the English media, basically the foreign media wanted to beat everybody to the next headline. And long story short, it gets to a point where she's got nicknames, Foxy Nazi. There are there's some possible rumors or in these headlines of the newspapers or even the tabloids that it was some sort of a sex thing gone wrong, which now involves Raphael, her boyfriend, and Meredith didn't want to play along, so that's why they killed her. And now Amanda is sort of the mastermind of this whole plot. So things go south in a hurry for Amanda. And imagine yourself, that Italian is not your native language. You know a little bit, but now all of a sudden you're in an Italian jail, accused of murder, and these courtroom proceedings and all these other things are all in Italian. You don't understand the legal system. You don't even understand fully the language. And, you find yourself, and even things, and we mention this to kids all the time, it's the things that you think are harmless on social media can sometimes be used against you, like this picture in back of Mr. Bogus. It's in a museum somewhere where she sat down and, acted like she was using this machine gun. Raphael has a picture on his social media, which appears to be maybe a Halloween picture where he wrapped himself in toilet paper and he had a big meat cleaver. And so, of course, he's a murderer because who posts those things on social media? So, they found themselves going down a rabbit hole very quickly. These two young kids, really, because I think she was at the time maybe 22.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe 20 or I think they're 20 or 21, something like that. Yeah,
very early 20s. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of world experience at this point, we'll say.
Yeah. So we'll get briefly into some of the evidence that they tried to use against her in Raphael, kind of together, because they were tried in the Italian courts together. One thing was they tried to place Raphael at the scene with his DNA being on Meredith Kutcher's bra clasp. bra clasp was found separate from the bra. It was found under a partial rug in Meredith's room. The
Many
other
days
thing
later,
what?
also.
Oh, sorry. What's
Many
that?
days later, I think it was close to 40 days after the murder, they found the
Yeah.
bra clasp. So they didn't even
Yes, you're
find it
right.
on their first search of the room.
And the other big piece of evidence was they took a bunch of knives from Raphael's apartment to see if any of them could be the possible murder weapon, and they did find one that tested to have a small sample of Meredith's DNA of some kind. We don't know if it was blood or what, but some kind of DNA on the blade, and a little bit of Amanda's blood or DNA on the handle. Interestingly enough, it was found in Raphael's apartment, but none of Raphael's DNA was found on that night.
I'm going to share my screen now. So this is the kitchen knife that Mr. Bogus was talking about, and you can see here Amanda's DNA was found on the handle, a little bit on the upper part of the blade, and then Meredith Kircher's DNA, very, very small amount. And we can talk about that for a second. First of all, Mr. Bogus just mentioned this, very, very unusual that if this is a knife that belongs to Raphael, found in Raphael's kitchen, and there's no DNA from Raphael on the knife, that's unusual. If Amanda is staying at Raphael's quite frequently and cooking dinner and doing all these things, it's not unusual to find her DNA on the knife. What was unusual, obviously, is to find that amount of Meredith's DNA on the blade. So really, that's what they kind of hung their entire case on. The quote unquote smoking gun, if you will, was how is Meredith's DNA on the blade if Amanda and Raphael are innocent, or even if Amanda is innocent. And maybe you can go into a possible scenario, Mr. Bogus, how Meredith's DNA could have been found on that blade.
Well, what happened was, to kind of jump the gun here a little bit, is that Raphael and Amanda are found guilty of the murder of Meredith Kushner. And similar to the United States, there is an appeal process. So, of course, Amanda and Raphael do appeal. And during the appeal process, they re-examine the evidence. And they had a third-party lab look at all the evidence that the police had taken in and stuff like that. And one thing they saw with the logs and charts is that and pictures, is that when they were testing all the samples, they were testing literally all the samples at the same time. There was a rush to get a conviction in this case. So the crime lab, had samples of Meredith and Amanda and Raphael all next to each other, all on the table, pretty much contaminating each other and touching each other and things like that. So you could have had a hairbrush from Amanda right next to her on top of this knife. You could add something from Meredith, like that bra clasp we were just talking about, also touching that knife. And you had cross-contamination, and that's how you're going to have small samples falling on onto the blade and handle of the knife.
Right. Yeah. So get into the science. Just a quick minute here. The science of DNA testing is super, super sensitive. That's why if you were going to try to use the term lift or somehow collect DNA from a sample of clothing or knife or whatever, you're going to want to wear what we all have to wear now, which is masks. You're going to want to wear a mask so that your own DNA from your breath, droplets, whatever, is not contaminating the sample. So that's why in a real lab situation, these people have very, very strict procedures on what they wear, how to collect the samples, make sure multiple samples are not in the mix. You don't want to have contamination from one sample transfer to another. You want to make sure that your DNA evidence that you are collecting is only from that sample and not from any other source. And from the pictures that they showed in this case during some of the trial, it was clear that they had all of these different pieces of evidence or samples of evidence on the same table, testing them at the same time in a rush, as Mr. Bogus said. So clearly a contamination situation there,
Yeah.
meaning you
So
can't trust any of the DNA evidence.
you can't trust any of it. So I'm going to share my screen just for a quick moment because I'm going to show you guys what we think is the actual culprit here. Because obviously, as you can tell, we have been sort of hinting at that it wasn't Raphael and Amanda, and there was another person. His name was Rudy Gaudet, somebody who was hanging out with Meredith Kushner, even hanging out with her that very night. And he fled once Meredith was found dead. He fled to Germany, and his name came up a couple of times. He had a checkered past, a lot of like small armed robbery things, and some small assaults here and there, and really was not investigated because he was not in the country. Like I said, he fled. But the police had set up a Skype call with a friend of his, and this is some interesting information. This friend is Jack, and here's Rudy here, and they're talking about that night. And Rudy's saying, "Oh yeah, I was in the bathroom when it happened. There was some other guy there, and I tried to stop him and stuff like that." But you can see here in the bold it says Amanda had nothing to do with this. So the guy Jack asks a little bit more, like, "Well, what do you mean?" And Rudy says, "Yeah, Amanda was not even there that night." And we do know that Amanda said that she was at Raphael's apartment, so that does corroborate that she was not even in the apartment when Meredith might have been killed. And then Rudy says, or then the guy says, "And who else was there?" And then Rudy says, I don't know. I didn't see his face." And he goes on a little bit more, saying that I only met Amanda at that place, which is that Patrick Mumbai's place, a couple of times. And after that, I didn't talk to her anymore. I just saw her one other time. So he definitely knows what Amanda looks like, and knows her face, and said she wasn't even at the apartment. So I think that's very telling. So I guess we'll go right to the end then, kind of give our opinions with all this. I'll stop sharing here. And I really think that Amanda Raphael had nothing to do with it. The DNA evidence kind of suggests that. I mean, Amanda's DNA is not even in Meredith's room, and Raphael's only on the broad clasp, which clearly could have been contaminated from the shoddy job that the crime lab did. So I do think it was Rudy Gaudet. He did have the checkered past, like I just talked about. He had a bunch of run-ins with the law, and I think he just was looking to have a good time with Meredith that night. She must have stopped it. He got physical, he got violent, and it went too far. And I think when he realized what he did, he booked. He jumped out the window, and he fled the country. And I don't think an innocent person would flee the country if they had nothing to do with it.
Right. And as Mr. Bogus mentioned in the last video we did on John Bonet, it probably would have probably would be better if we both had differing viewpoints. But he's spot on. Rudy Gaudet killed Meredith Kircher. Rudy Gaudet's DNA is all over Meredith's bedroom. Amanda's DNA, interestingly enough, is not even in. They didn't even find Amanda's DNA in her bedroom. But yet, it's on the knife. So, she had to have been in very, very in some sort of a suit, some sort of a hazmat suit or something, in order to kill her. But yeah, so Rudy's DNA is all over the room, and coupled with the contamination and overzealous prosecutor, in the Netflix documentary, you can see sort of how he approaches himself. He references, I think his name was Giuliani Manini, and he references Sherlock Holmes, and even as a kid, he would love to solve these crimes just based on little things. And so he took how Amanda's sort of a carefree attitude. You got to understand, also, Amanda knew this girl. Yeah, it was a roommate, but she knew her for about 2 weeks. So she didn't have this like intense, lifelong relationship with this girl who is now murdered. It freaked her out, and she was, but she wasn't in a constant state of mourning, which is, and then of course, as you can see with, behind me, she's making out or kissing her boyfriend outside of the apartment, and they found that to be super odd. So yeah, behavior. And I think if you watch the documentary, you'll see that she is a little socially inept at times, in some of the things that some of the ways she acts, we'll say. But that doesn't make her a murderer. And so the evidence was just not there for Amanda and Raphael, and it was all over the place for Rudy Gaudet. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, so I think that's all we have for you guys today on the Amanda Knox case. This is another episode of Case by Case, featuring the serial thrillers, Mr. Smith and Mr. Bogus. And what do we always say, Mr. Smith?
We solve them all till we solve them all. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.